Well, a good Monday morning. We have our 8 a.m. advisory in from the National Hurricane Center on this area that we are still monitoring for development. So very high chances of development over the next 2 days. We have an 80% chance over the next 48 hours now. That's an uptick from 70% that was as of the 2 a.m. update early this morning, and 90% chance of development still for the days after that. I know it says the next week, but that is really just for Wednesday on into Thursday, because I think it is very likely that the system does develop into a named storm by the end of the next 48 hours. So you can see this red outline kind of box right here, and that is still hinting at possible northward motion into the eastern portion of the Gulf of Mexico and getting very close to our neck of the woods here in central Georgia. But right now, this cluster of thunderstorms trying to organize off the coast of Honduras and Nicaragua off in the Caribbean Sea, and going to continue to trek through this northwestern portion of the Caribbean Sea and then eventually the Gulf of Mexico, obviously having the potential to go in between Yucatan and Cuba here and not go over any landmass. So that would lead to further intensification with this named system. So taking a look at what it is right now, well, they're calling this Tropical Wave Invest 97L, which is just really a fancy term for an area of interest that the National Hurricane Center is monitoring. So you can see that center of low pressure right there where I was just talking about in the Caribbean Sea to the east, kind of northeast of Honduras and Nicaragua. 30 mile an hour sustained winds as of right now. So obviously once you get closer up into the 40s, that's when we start to see things like tropical depression, tropical storms, and that would actually give it the next name on the list. But right now, pressure at 1,004 millibars, so that's definitely not too strong in terms of the pressure as of right now. But like I said, going to continue to intensify and moving north at 5 miles an hour as of right now, so not really moving at a very fast speed whatsoever. Now we're going to take a look at the spaghetti plots, because this is a pretty good indication, at least of the possible spread of where the center of this storm will go. So each one of these lines that you do see, that is the center of the storm. That's not the impacts. We'll get to that in just a second. But right now, a good amount of agreement that this is going to go in between the Yucatan and Cuba. So like I said, if it continues to trek over water, obviously when tropical systems move over land, they continue to weaken. So this would allow for further intensification into the warm waters of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But then let's take it a little bit past that. So now we get into the timestamp Thursday on into Friday morning. You can see all of these lines, a very wide spread of where this system will make landfall. From even stretching as far west over as maybe the Biloxi area on coastal Mississippi, as far east as areas further down into the Gulf Coast of Florida, areas like Tampa Bay and such. But as you can see, this red outline kind of giving us a good depiction of what all of the models are really coming into agreement with. This is just the GFS. This is just one set of models. So you can see it has its track going through central Georgia here around the Macon area, but also making landfall around that Big Bend area, which is very similar, or a very similar path to where Debbie has gone over the past couple of months, and also Idalia as of last year. But it does look like there is a lot more agreement that this is going to stay somewhere between Mississippi and Florida to make landfall. We did even see some models as of this morning go further out to the Louisiana coast, just where Francine was just about 2 weeks ago. But you can definitely see there is still a widespread this far out. This is all going to change, and we will get a better idea upon formation, because like I said, where that system forms could have some 100 or maybe 200 mile influence about where that system does make landfall. But I'll show you what the models say as of right now. Like I said, anything but certain. We still have some fine tuning to do, but going to go ahead and show you what the long range models say right now. So we have this approaching front from the west. We're hoping that continues to push into central Georgia here, because that would continue to allow this system to steer further out back to the Atlantic coast, and that would put us also hopefully on the west side, which is the calmer side of that system. When you're on the east side, that's where you get the more severe weather implications. That's what we call the dirty side of the storm. So trying to make landfall sometime Thursday evening, but still going to see the impacts like you just saw as of the last timestamp. Sometime Thursday afternoon, those outer bands of rain going to start to impact central Georgia here. And then as we take it into the overnight hours, early Friday morning, that's when we're looking at maybe some possible severe weather implications. But I will note that these models have shifted a little bit further to the east as of the latest run this morning. So that is definitely good news, and hopefully a good indication that we are going to continue to see a steering to the east with this associated system. So after that, we start to clear on out as we go throughout Friday evening. So hopefully we don't get too many severe weather implications here in central Georgia, and there won't be too much damage in terms of trees down, power lines down, and it will be a nice night for football on Friday after we get some much needed rain here in central Georgia. And then after that, even more question marks really with this system, but it does look like Saturday is trending mostly clear as of right now. But like I I said, this is just where it stands as of right now. This is anything but certain. Once we get formation, hopefully later today, we will have a better idea of the possible path that this system will take. But like I said, it's called Invest 97L as of right now. So the next name on the list would be Helene. This would be our 8th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season. So once we get that name, like I said, we will be able to get a better idea of the strength and the path. And a lot of the models I have seen, all those longer range models, even varying from the GFS to the Canadian model to the Euro model, we have seen a good amount of confidence and agreement that this is actually going to get fairly intense in terms of a strong hurricane. But like I said, still up in the air a little bit about that and the path. So it all depends on when and where that system does form. And like I said, hopefully later on today that we have a better idea of that. But one thing is for certain, we definitely look to get our fair share of rain and our fair share of gusty winds here in central Georgia, no matter what side of the storm we're on. But if we are on that east side, like I said, so if we're east of that center of circulation, that would be the dirty side where you have more severe weather implications. Things like severe thunderstorm warnings and spin up tornadoes also going to be possible. So we're going to continue to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, because obviously this does have a very widespread impact as of right now that I did just show you. And those spaghetti plots, that was the center. And I showed you the long range models that showed the widespread impacts that it's going to have across Florida, across Georgia, maybe even as far west as Mississippi and Alabama, and also into areas like the Carolinas or maybe even Tennessee and getting over into Arkansas, depending on where the system goes further out into the weekend. It will be something that you will need to closely monitor, as we will be closely monitoring it throughout today and throughout tomorrow upon formation, and we will continue to keep you updated as we get updates here on the Weather Team.